Now let's talk about the AWS transfer family. So the idea is that you want to send data in and out of the Amazon S3 or EFS file system, but you don't want to use the S3 APIs. You don't want to use the EFS network file system. You just want to use the FTP protocol. In this case, you need to use the transfer family service from AWS. So it supports three kinds of protocols. It supports AWS transfer for FTP, so the file transfer protocol, and the FTP and FTPS, which is the file transfer protocol over SSL, so encrypted form, or SFTP, which is secure file transfer protocol. And now you don't need to be an expert on those, just to know that FTP is unencrypted, whereas the FTPS and SFTP are encrypted in flight. Now the idea is that using the FTP protocol, you can upload to S3 or EFS. The transfer family has a fully managed infrastructure. It's scalable, reliable, and highly available. So you want to manage at all that capability. And in terms of pricing, you are going to pay per provisioned endpoints per hour, plus free per gigabytes of data transferred in and out of the transfer family. You can store and manage the user credentials for that service within the service, or you can also integrate with existing authentication system such as Microsoft Active Directory, LDAP, Okta, Amazon Cognito, or any custom like authentication system. The uses of this is you have an FTP interface into Amazon S3 or EFS. So it's to share files, to share public data set, to do the CRM and ERP, etc., etc. So as just a diagram for you to understand, the transfer family has three flavors, and the users can access directly using the endpoints of the FTP. So, or optionally, you can use a DNS called Route 53 to provide your own host name into the FTP service, and then the FTP service. So the transfer for the FTP service will have an IAM role that will be assumed to send or receive the files from Amazon S3 or Amazon EFS. Amazon EFS, as you will be able to see that now, Amazon EFS, and this is done transparently. You don't have to set many things up. And finally, if you wanted to secure the transfer family services, then you could authenticate your users using an external authentication system such as like Active Directory, LDAP, or all the things that I just said in the previous slide, for like some of the examples of the authentication system that I gave there. Now, if you need to learn about the endpoint types for the transfer family and their associated security, so the public endpoint looks like this, as I'm given in the diagram. So with the endpoint in our cloud, and the internet is going to be able to access this point. Now what is going to happen is that the public IP of this endpoint is going to be managed by AWS, and that is something that can be changing over time. So the IP can change over time, and so the recommendation is for you to use the DNS name and the public DNS name of your endpoint. And that means also that with this setup, you can set up all allow list to filter by source IP address from the network security. You still get a security from within the endpoint, but you cannot have a firewall that will only allow a specific IPs. The other option is to use VPC endpoint with internal access. So in this case, your SFTP, for example, is going to be deployed within your VPC, and your EC2 instances within your VPC are able to access privately your endpoint and your corporate data center if connected via VPN or direct connect. And it can also access your internal endpoint. So here you get static private IPs to access your endpoints, and you can set up allow list because you can leverage now the security group feature or network ACLs, NACLs, to get access and manage access points in your endpoint. So these two make sense, but you can get a hybrid version of it. So called the VPC endpoint with internet facing access. So in this case, while we get the same VPC, and we can have the EC2 instances within our VPC or any server in our corporate data center to access privately our endpoints. But also we can set up public IPs for our endpoints using an elastic IP. So in this case, we have full control over the elastic IP because we attach it ourselves, and therefore the internet can access again our endpoint using the elastic IP. But because we manage everything, then we can set up security groups to actually control who from the internet can access our SFTP, for example. So it's very important for you to understand the different endpoint types, and the exam will ask you to choose the correct one, and hopefully that makes sense from an architectural decision. Okay, so that's it for this lecture, and I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next one.